I'm 27F, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that one tiny lie can completely spiral out of control. Growing up, I lived in a modest middle-class household with parents who believed in saving every penny and keeping up appearances. Our house was always spotless, we wore ironed clothes even to the grocery store, and we didn't talk about family problems outside the house. My parents weren't bad people, they just valued discipline and frugality above all else. Looking back, it was probably their way of compensating for not having much when they were younger. I got my first real job at 24, working in marketing for a mid-sized company. That's where I met Emily. Emily was everything I wasn't: confident, loud, and effortlessly stylish. She was the kind of person who always had her nails done, her hair in perfect curls, and her phone filled with vacation pictures. She grew up rich, and she made sure everyone knew it. It wasn't in a braggy way, though. It was more like wealth was her default setting, and she couldn't imagine life being any different. We became friends over time, mostly because we worked on the same team, and Emily was the kind of person who made you feel included. She'd invite me to coffee or lunch, and soon I was hearing all about her fancy dinners, her parents' vacation home, and the designer shoes she bought on a whim. I admired her confidence and envied her lifestyle, though I'd never admit it. It all started with a stupid comment during one of those lunches. Emily looked at me, smiling, and said, "You're so polished, you could totally pass as a millionaire's daughter." I should have laughed it off. I should have changed the subject. Instead, I blurted out, "Well, my dad owns a few businesses, so I guess I get it from him." I have no idea why I said it. It just came out. Emily's eyes lit up. "Really? That's so cool. What kind of businesses?" My brain scrambled for something believable, and I ended up mumbling something about logistics and real estate. She didn't press for details, and I thought I'd gotten away with it. But that one lie set everything in motion. Emily introduced me to her friend group shortly after, a mix of wealthy 20-somethings who were just as polished and put together as she was. They just assumed I was like them, and I didn't correct them. Instead, I leaned into it. I started posting pictures on Instagram that made me look more upscale, a coffee shop in a fancy hotel lobby, a public park that looked like it could be part of a private estate, and even a luxury car parked on the street that wasn't mine. To keep up the charade, I borrowed designer clothes and accessories from another coworker who sold secondhand luxury items. I'd snap a picture and return them the next day. I wasn't spending any real money, but it still felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff every time I posted something. Things escalated quickly. Emily started inviting me to exclusive events, charity galas, rooftop parties, you name it. I always had an excuse to avoid paying for anything big. I'd joke about waiting for my dad's credit card replacement or pretend I had meetings to attend. It worked, but the pressure to keep up was intense. Then Emily hit me with the big one. Her family was hosting a massive yacht party, and she insisted I bring my parents to meet everyone. She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I laughed nervously and told her I'd check with them, but my stomach was doing backflips. My parents wouldn't fit into that world, not even for a second. My dad wears clothes from clearance racks, and my mom is the type to bring coupons to fancy restaurants. For days, I toyed with the idea of hiring actors to play my parents. I even looked up agencies, but the cost was insane, and it felt like a disaster waiting to happen. I thought about coming clean to Emily, but every time I got close, I'd chicken out. I couldn't handle the idea of her laughing at me, or, worse, telling everyone else. When I finally mentioned the party to my parents, they were thrilled. They thought it was so sweet of Emily's family to invite us and started planning their outfits immediately. My mom found a dress at a discount store, and my dad pulled out his one good suit. Watching them get so excited only made me feel worse. To buy myself time, I told Emily my dad was shy about meeting new people but would come if I insisted. She seemed fine with it, but then she started asking more about his businesses, how he got started, what they were like. I had to come up with an elaborate backstory on the spot. Every time I thought I'd gotten away with something, she'd ask another question. Now, with the party just days away, I have no idea how I'm going to pull this off. The truth is bound to come out, and when it does, it's going to be a complete train wreck. Update 1. The days leading up to the yacht party felt like a countdown to disaster. Every interaction with Emily and her friends seemed to turn the spotlight on my wealthy family, and the pressure to keep up appearances was suffocating. Emily couldn't stop gushing about how excited her friends were to meet my parents. I overheard her telling someone they're so successful, I bet they have the most incredible stories. Every word felt like another nail in my coffin. Then came the twist that almost made me lose it. Emily casually mentioned that a famous influencer would be at the party. She described this person as a friend of her family who attended their events often. I didn't catch the name, but it didn't matter. The idea of someone with a massive online following being there added a new level of stakes. It wasn't just my lie unraveling in front of a small group of people. It could go viral. Meanwhile, my parents were completely in their element. They proudly showed me the outfits they'd picked out. My mom had found a glittery dress that looked like it was straight out of the 80s, and my dad had dusted off his old suit, which fit him about 10 years and 20 pounds ago. They were so excited about the party, talking about meeting Emily's family, and how nice it was that I had such good friends. I nodded along, trying not to scream. I knew they'd stick out like sore thumbs, but how could I tell them not to come when they were so genuinely happy? I started to consider ways to back out entirely. I thought about calling in sick or inventing a family emergency. But Emily had already mentioned the party to too many people. If I didn't show up, it would raise questions. Worse, I could see Emily asking my parents directly why we didn't make it, and that would only make things worse. Desperation kicked in. I called a friend, Megan, who knew about the lie and begged her to come as my assistant. The idea was simple. She'd stay close to my parents and deflect any probing questions. Megan was hesitant but eventually agreed, mostly because she wanted to see how this train wreck would play out. The day of the party arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. We drove to the marina where the yacht was docked, and I knew we were out of our league the moment we parked. The cars in the lot were a lineup of luxury brands: Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and Mercedes. My dad commented on how over the top everything looked, while my mom joked about how she'd never seen so many expensive cars in one place. The yacht itself was massive, gleaming under the sun like something out of a music video. As we stepped aboard, I could feel my parents' awe and the judgmental stares from Emily's friends. They were polite enough, smiling and shaking hands, but the awkwardness was palpable. I quickly introduced Megan as my assistant, which earned a few impressed nods. Emily's parents were friendly and gracious, welcoming us like we were old friends, but their questions were sharp. They asked my dad about his businesses, how he started, what kind of challenges he faced. My dad, clueless about the lie, kept deflecting, talking about how he liked to keep things private and preferred not to mix business with pleasure. It wasn't a bad save, but it clearly left Emily's parents curious. The most nerve-wracking moment came when a guest casually mentioned a logistics company I'd claimed my dad owned. I froze, but my dad laughed and said, "Oh, that's a long story. Let's just say it's a family secret." Somehow, his charm worked, and the guest dropped the topic. Surprisingly, my parents started winning people over. My mom's down-to-earth humor and my dad's laid-back attitude seemed refreshing to Emily's polished, high-society crowd. People laughed at my mom's stories about raising kids on a tight budget and seemed genuinely interested in my dad's take on staying humble. I could see the confusion in their faces. They liked my parents but couldn't reconcile that with the image of a wealthy business-owning family. Emily, however, was starting to catch on. Her smile didn't reach her eyes when she asked me more pointed questions about my dad's businesses or where we vacationed. I danced around the answers, making vague comments about preferring to stay local and family traditions. She didn't call me out, but I could tell she was storing everything away. The party dragged on, and I couldn't relax. Guests were taking photos constantly, and I knew some of them would tag me. If anyone from my real life saw those, it would be game over. I spent the evening trying to stay in the background while also keeping an eye on my parents who were having the time of their lives. As the party wound down, Emily pulled me aside. She smiled and told me how much her parents enjoyed meeting mine. Then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned how excited she was to see my family estate. "Maybe next weekend?" she said casually. I nodded, too stunned to respond properly. I have no idea how I'm going to handle this. All I know is that the truth is getting harder and harder to hide. Update 2. The day after the yacht party, Emily sent me a message about visiting my family estate. She suggested making a day out of it, even offering to bring wine and snacks. I responded quickly, telling her the estate was under renovation. I threw in details about how we were updating the landscaping and doing major repairs to preserve the charm. Emily seemed to accept it, at least for the moment, and I felt like I'd bought myself a little time. That evening, my parents sat me down. My mom looked confused as she asked why Emily and her friends thought we were wealthy. My dad chimed in, saying he'd overheard someone mention our business empire during the party. I couldn't dodge the question anymore. I told them the truth, starting with the offhand comment to Emily about owning businesses and ending with the snowball of lies that followed. They stared at me in disbelief. My mom looked hurt, asking why I didn't just tell the truth. My dad sighed, saying he'd noticed how uncomfortable I'd seemed all evening but didn't want to embarrass me. After a long pause, they reluctantly agreed to help me keep up the act for now. My mom, always resourceful, even suggested we stage some photos to make it more convincing. The next day, we drove to a nearby mansion I'd read about online. It was listed as a rental property for events and photo shoots, and I figured it was perfect for what we needed. My dad parked a little nervously, muttering about how ridiculous it was to pretend we owned the place. I set up my phone and directed my parents to pose by the fountain in the driveway. My mom smiled like she was hosting a garden party, and my dad leaned casually against a marble column. We spent about an hour snapping photos on the steps, near the pool, and even by a vintage car parked nearby. I uploaded the best ones to my Instagram later that evening, captioning them with vague phrases like, "Love visiting home when I can," there, and renovations coming along beautifully. The likes rolled in quickly, with Emily commenting about how gorgeous everything looked. For a moment, it seemed like the plan had worked, but Emily wasn't letting up. Over the next few days, she kept asking questions about the estate. She wanted to know the history of the house, who our interior designer was, and when renovations would be finished. I kept dodging her with half answers, claiming my parents handled most of the details. She didn't seem entirely convinced, and her tone started to shift, still polite, but noticeably colder. Things got worse when one of Emily's friends, who'd been at the yacht party, messaged me about the photos. She recognized the mansion and knew the actual owners. Panic set in as I scrambled to come up with a believable excuse. I replied that the house was co-owned by distant relatives and that they often rented it out for events. It seemed to satisfy her for now, but I could feel the walls closing in. Emily invited me and my parents to a follow-up dinner at her house. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't decline without raising suspicion. My mom wore the same thrift store dress from the yacht party, and my dad put on his suit again. As we sat down to dinner, Emily's parents started asking more questions. My dad, trying to help, mentioned something about keeping investments private, but it directly contradicted the story I told Emily earlier about our family businesses. Emily's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't say anything. After dinner, Emily barely spoke to me. She excused herself early, leaving me alone with her parents and friends. I could tell something had shifted. On the way home, my parents brought it up again. They told me this was getting out of hand and that I needed to come clean. My dad warned that lies only get harder to maintain, while my mom said she didn't want to be part of another staged charade. The next morning, I saw a post on social media that made my stomach drop. Someone from the party had shared a vague story about a mystery guest who seemed too good to be true. The comments were filled with speculation, and though my name wasn't mentioned, I knew it was only a matter of time before people connected the dots. Later that day, Emily texted me. She told me she was retracting an invitation to an upcoming event, saying she thought it would be awkward. It was a clear sign that she didn't believe me anymore. I considered ghosting her entirely, blocking her on social media, and avoiding her at work, but I knew it wouldn't solve anything. As I sat there trying to figure out my next move, Emily sent another text. "We need to talk." I stared at the screen, knowing that this conversation could either end the lie or blow it up completely. Update 3. When I walked into the cafe to meet Emily, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with her phone in hand. She looked up as I approached, her expression unreadable but not friendly. I sat down and she wasted no time. She started listing off every inconsistency she'd noticed. The stories about my dad's businesses, the estate under renovation, the staged photos on my Instagram, it all came up. She didn't hold back. She told me she'd done some digging and found out the mansion in my photos was a rental property. She mentioned how my parents' demeanor at the yacht party didn't match the image I'd created. She even brought up the mutual friend who had recognized the mansion and the growing whispers among her social circle. I tried to hold it together, but as the weight of everything she said sank in, I broke down. I admitted everything. The lie I told at lunch, how it snowballed, and the pressure to keep it going. I told her I didn't expect it to spiral so far, and that I was terrified of being exposed. Emily sat there, listening, but her expression didn't soften. She said she felt betrayed. She thought I was one of her closest friends, and now she didn't know what was real. She asked why I lied in the first place. I tried to explain, saying it started as an impulsive mistake and grew into something I couldn't control. But nothing I said seemed to make a difference. Word spread quickly. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was blowing up with notifications. People from Emily's circle were commenting on my posts, mocking the photos and captions I'd shared. The worst was a story someone posted about the girl who faked her way into high society, complete with screenshots of my Instagram. It felt like everyone was piling on, sharing jokes and memes at my expense. The next day, my parents got a call from Emily's parents. They wanted to discuss what had happened, and my mom was mortified. When they met, my parents apologized for being part of the deception, explaining they were trying to support me. Surprisingly, Emily's parents were understanding. They even complimented my parents for their honesty and said they appreciated how genuine they were, despite the circumstances. But the damage was done. The fallout from the confrontation spread beyond social media. At work, people whispered about me in the hallways. My boss pulled me aside to talk about the situation, mentioning that trust was a crucial part of my role. While I wasn't fired, the conversation made it clear my reputation had taken a hit. Amid the chaos, one unexpected person reached out. Anna, one of Emily's friends. She sent me a private message saying she understood why I felt pressured to lie. She admitted that she'd come from a modest background herself and only gained access to wealth through her marriage. Anna's message was the first kind word I'd received in days, and it felt like a lifeline. Anna even spoke to Emily's parents on my behalf, telling them I wasn't a bad person, but someone who'd made a mistake and gotten in over her head. Her words seemed to help, as Emily's parents softened their stance. They didn't condone what I'd done, but they acknowledged that I wasn't malicious, just insecure and overwhelmed. The public humiliation, however, didn't stop. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of the fallout. At work, social gatherings, and even in casual conversations, the story seemed to follow me. It felt like everyone was talking about me, and not in a good way. Emily eventually reached out again. This time, she gave me an ultimatum. If I apologized publicly to her and her friends, she'd consider forgiving me. She framed it as an opportunity to set the record straight and own my mistakes. But I couldn't do it. The idea of standing in front of her group and groveling for acceptance felt like giving away the last shred of dignity I had left. I declined, knowing it would cost me whatever chance I had at repairing the friendship. In the end, I lost my place in Emily's social circle entirely. Invitations stopped coming, and people who once called me a friend avoided me. But as the days passed, I started to feel something unexpected, a sense of relief. Without the lie hanging over me, I didn't have to pretend anymore. It wasn't the clean slate I'd hoped for, but it was better than the constant anxiety I'd been living with. My parents stood by me through it all. They encouraged me to focus on rebuilding my life honestly, reminding me that true friends would accept me for who I really was. I started to see how much I'd taken them for granted during this whole mess, and their support became the foundation I needed to move forward. As I sit here now, I can't help but wonder if I'll ever truly recover from the fallout. The damage feels permanent in some ways, lost friendships, a tarnished reputation, and the weight of knowing I caused it all. But maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance to make amends and move on. Update 4. Adjusting to life without Emily's friend group was strange. My social calendar, once packed with events and invitations, was suddenly empty. There were no more yacht parties, rooftop dinners, or casual brunches at overpriced cafes. It felt isolating at first, but it was also a relief. I no longer had to fake anything. No more lies, no more pretending. The pressure was gone, but the silence left a void. At work, things were awkward. The rumors from the yacht party had reached my coworkers, and while no one confronted me outright, the looks and whispers were constant. Meetings felt tense, and I noticed some people avoiding me altogether. My boss kept things professional but distant, a clear shift from before. It was hard to focus, knowing everyone around me likely knew the truth. One afternoon, Anna reached out again. She'd been the only one from Emily's group to show me kindness during the fallout. She invited me for coffee, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Over lattes in a quiet cafe, she opened up about her own story. Anna had grown up in a modest household too. She told me how hard it was to navigate Emily's world, even after marrying into wealth. She understood the pressure to fit in and how easy it was to feel out of place. As we talked, Anna mentioned that her husband was looking for freelance help with his business. She thought I'd be a good fit and offered to introduce us. I was hesitant at first, worried about bringing my baggage into a professional setting, but Anna assured me it was a genuine opportunity. A week later, I met her husband, and he offered me a freelance gig that paid well and let me work on my own terms. It was a lifeline I desperately needed, and I threw myself into the work. Around the same time, I started reconnecting with old friends. These were people I drifted away from while maintaining my fake lifestyle. Friends who knew the real me. It wasn't easy at first. Some were hurt by my distance, but as I explained what had happened, they were surprisingly understanding. One friend joked that she'd have never believed I could pull off pretending to be rich. Slowly, those friendships started to feel solid again, and I realized how much I'd missed them. Through it all, my parents were my biggest supporters. They didn't lecture me or dwell on my mistakes. Instead, they encouraged me to focus on moving forward. My mom would call just to check in and remind me how proud she was of my honesty, even if it came too late. My dad helped me brainstorm ideas for my freelance work, treating it like a fresh start. Emily, however, wanted nothing to do with me. She blocked me on social media and avoided me completely at work events. At one point, I decided to write her a letter. I poured out everything, my insecurities, the pressure I felt, and how sorry I was for betraying her trust. I hoped it would at least open the door to a conversation. A week later, I got a short, blunt reply. She couldn't trust me again. That was it. No chance to explain, no path to forgiveness. Feeling stuck, I decided to share my story anonymously online. Not on Reddit, I wasn't ready for that level of exposure, but on a small blog I'd created years ago and abandoned. I wrote about everything, the lie that spiraled out of control, the fallout, and the lessons I was trying to learn. I wasn't expecting much, but to my surprise, people started reaching out. Strangers left comments, sharing their own stories of insecurity and pretending to be something they weren't. It felt oddly cathartic, knowing I wasn't alone. The blog even gained a small following. A few posts went semi-viral, and people began messaging me for advice or just to say they appreciated my honesty. It wasn't redemption, but it felt like I was finally turning the mess into something positive. One day, Anna invited me to a dinner party she was hosting. It wasn't one of Emily's flashy events. No yachts, no influencers. It was a small gathering with people Anna thought I'd get along with. She described them as down-to-earth and kind, the kind of crowd where I wouldn't have to pretend. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to go, to start rebuilding my social life with people who might actually like me for who I was. But another part of me was terrified. What if they judged me? What if they knew about the fallout with Emily? I wasn't sure I was ready to step back into a world even loosely connected to my old lies. As I stared at Anna's invitation, I realized this was a turning point. I could either keep hiding or take a chance on something real. For now, I'm still deciding. Update 5. I decided to attend Anna's dinner party. It felt like a big step after everything that had happened, but I trusted Anna's judgment. The gathering was nothing like the flashy events Emily used to host. It was held in Anna's cozy backyard, with string lights overhead and a long wooden table set with mismatched plates. Guests were casually dressed, sipping wine and chatting about books, travel, and their favorite local spots. The atmosphere was relaxed, warm, and welcoming. As soon as I walked in, Anna greeted me and introduced me to the group. These weren't the type of people who cared about designer clothes or expensive vacations. Instead, they were genuinely interested in getting to know me. One guest laughed at my stories about my parents' thrift store finds, while another asked for tips on managing a freelance career. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could just be myself. Things were going well until I saw Emily. She arrived halfway through the evening, carrying a bottle of wine and greeting Anna with a hug. My heart sank. I hadn't expected to see her, and judging by her brief glance in my direction, she hadn't expected me either. She was polite but distant, sticking to the opposite side of the table and engaging mostly with Anna and a few other guests. Throughout the night, there was an unspoken tension between us. Every so often, I'd catch her looking at me, her expression neutral but unreadable. Anna must have noticed because, at one point, she pulled me aside and suggested I talk to Emily. She believed it was time for both of us to clear the air. Reluctantly, I agreed. Anna created a moment for us by stepping away, leaving me and Emily alone in a quiet corner of the yard. I started by apologizing again, this time face to face. I explained everything, the insecurity, the pressure, and how I felt out of place in her world. I told her how much I regretted betraying her trust and how hard it had been to watch our friendship crumble. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed and admitted she had felt deeply betrayed. She said she'd considered me her closest friend, someone she could confide in, and it hurt to realize I'd lied about such a fundamental part of my life. She didn't let me off the hook, but she also said she understood why I'd felt the need to pretend. We talked for a while longer, and though the conversation wasn't easy, it ended on a hopeful note. Emily made it clear she wasn't ready to rebuild our friendship, but she was willing to move forward without animosity. It wasn't the reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. After that night, I started focusing on building a new, healthier social circle. The people I met through Anna became a big part of that. They valued humor, honesty, and shared interests over appearances, and I found myself looking forward to spending time with them. Slowly, I began to feel like I belonged somewhere again. With Anna's continued support, my freelance career took off. Her husband connected me with more clients, and before long, I had steady work and financial independence. My parents couldn't have been happier. They celebrated every small milestone with me, from landing a big client to buying my first piece of furniture for my new apartment. Emily and I remained cordial but distant. A few months later, I heard she was moving away for a new job. There wasn't a formal goodbye, just a brief exchange of pleasantries at a mutual event. It felt like the closing of a chapter, one I was ready to leave behind. As life settled into a new rhythm, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. Pretending to be someone I wasn't had cost me so much: friendships, trust, and my own peace of mind. I realized that chasing surface-level acceptance had only deepened my insecurities. It wasn't until I let go of the facade that I started to find genuine connections. One of those connections came in the form of someone I met through Anna's circle. He was kind, funny, and appreciated my dry sense of humor. From the start, our conversations were easy and honest, and we quickly grew close. For the first time, I felt like I didn't have to hide any part of myself. Recently, I visited my parents at their home, the same modest house I once felt embarrassed by. We sat in the living room, laughing over my dad's attempts at a new hobby and my mom's excitement about a sale she'd found. As I looked around, I realized I wouldn't trade their love and support for all the wealth in the world. Life isn't perfect, but it's real. And after everything, that's more than enough for me.